This is day 4 of our Bible reading plan, so let's get into it. Genesis chapter 8 verses 10 through 11 says this, "And he stayed yet other 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark, and the dove came into him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off, so no one knew that the waters were abated from off the earth." The flood is one of those biblical accounts that is much debated because there are hundreds of accounts of the flood throughout the ancient Near East. It almost seems like everybody has their own version of the story. In short, many Christians and biblical scholars consider that the book of Genesis, or the Genesis account of the flood, is the most accurate among the many ancient flood stories for 3 main reasons. Number 1 is that it is theologically grounded and not mythologically driven. Most other ancient flood stories, like the Epic of Gilgamesh or Atrahasis, portray the flood as the result of quarreling, irritated, or afraid gods. The Bible, by contrast, presents the flood as a moral judgment by one sovereign, consistent, righteous God and not a divine tantrum. Number 2 is that it includes precise, testable details. Genesis provides specific measurements of the ark, a clear timeline, geographical markers like the mountain of Ararat, and a consistent sequence of events. Compared to other flood stories that are vague or symbolic, the biblical account preserves historical structure, the kind you would expect from a real-world event rather than just an allegory. And the last point is that it is internally consistent across scripture and history. Later biblical writers like Ezekiel, Isaiah, Peter, and even Jesus himself all refer to Noah and the flood as a real historical event, not a legend. The narrative fits logically into the Bible's larger storyline of sin, judgment, mercy, and covenant. I believe the existence of hundreds of similar flood accounts from different cultures actually strengthen and not weaken the biblical claim. It suggests there truly was a massive, unforgettable flood in human history, remembered in different forms as people spread out after Babel in the book of Genesis chapter 11. Moving on to Genesis chapter 9. Genesis chapter 9 and verse 13 says, "I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth." This is the account of God promising that he would never flood the earth again by making the rainbow a sign of that promise. The Hebrew word for rainbow is kashet. It is the same Hebrew word for bow, as in a bow and arrow or a weapon. That means when God places the rainbow in the sky after the flood, it can be understood as God hanging up his weapon of judgment. So you and I might imply or read that the rainbow is not just a pretty sign, but it is God's war bow being laid down. After the flood, God is saying, "I'm putting away the bow. I will not destroy the earth like this ever again." The bow in the sky is pointing away from the earth like a weapon no longer aimed. Lastly, Matthew chapter 4 verses 12 through 14 says this, "Now when Jesus had heard that John was cast into prison, he departed into Galilee, and leaving Nazareth, he came and dwelt in Capernaum, which is upon the sea coast in the borders of Zebulun and Naphtali, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet." This is so intentional on Jesus' part, and Matthew picks up on what's going on here. It's worthy to note that Nazareth was a small and rural area where Capernaum was on a much larger scale by the Sea of Galilee and more important for trade and for travel. Trade routes ran through Capernaum, which means Gentiles, non-Jews, regularly passed through. So when Jesus moved from Nazareth to Capernaum, I could only imagine he was doing that intentionally. He wasn't just changing scenery, but he was moving into a crossroads city where Jews and Gentiles mixed. That already started to hint that his message would not just be Jewish only. And Matthew goes on to actually quote the book of Isaiah chapter 9 verses 1 through 2, which says that a light will shine in a dark place in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali. He wants his readers to see that Jesus living in Capernaum means that the prophecy is being fulfilled. And Isaiah chapter 9 is not just about light, but it's also about a king that would one day be the Messiah. "For unto us a child is born." Matthew is reminding the Jewish readers that this is that promised king. This is that Messiah which you have hoped for. So Matthew's basically saying, notice where Jesus is. He's right next door to the Gentile world. That's not by accident. Jesus puts himself right in a border zone between Jews and the rest of the world, preparing for the day when the message will go to all nations. Thanks for joining me again on day 4. Hope to see you again tomorrow for day 5.